the Svapna hypothesis. In Bengaluru, a secretive research organization perfects Maya 99, a system that reconstructs human dreams with stunning fidelity. But the footage contains a subtle render watermark that also flickers at the edges of waking perception, evidence that everyday life is not as it seems. Episode 1. Cold Open, the first film. Midnight in Bengaluru has its own color grading. The rain doesn't fall, it hisses, spends itself on concrete, and leaves a satin glaze on the world. In the lab that night, the only motion was the low-frequency breathing of the cooling fans. Even the LED bars along the ceiling had learned to whisper. I wasn't there when the first film bloomed. I watched it later, in that washed-out hour between 3 and 4, when caffeine turns to superstition. It began as all good confessions do, with a hush, a censor net, a subject labeled to anonymize guilt. Sangeeta was on capture, one hand on the OPM array, the other hovering near the emergency cutoff as if the dream might push back. Subject 07 was already deep. The noise vector had collapsed into a usable shape, and the decoder, a sulking diva, finally chose to sing. The screen filled with a dim train platform, rendered with a kind of reverent fidelity. Stray dog, dot matrix signage, the halo of humid light around a sodium lamp. A mango vendor was rearranging the green shoulders of fruit to catch the eye. Chalk curved near the subject's feet in a looping rosette, each petal hand uncertain and yet precise enough to know what it wanted to be. Footsteps, mine, yours, all footsteps, arrived as softened staccato. A departing engine bled sound and light into a high-angle flare that could have been memory or yearning. Someone blew a child's whistle, bright as a pin. When the dream eye blinked, it wasn't just an occlusion. It was geometry. In the black between frames, something touched down, a faint 12-lobed rosette, blooming and vanishing like a secret handshake. On the recording, I could hear Sangeeta's breath snag, then her whisper, small enough to slip between the racks and still reach me when I played it back. "Sangeeta," whispering. "We got it. Seam lines and all." She glued an urgent flag to the file and forwarded it to Maya Sen. Somewhere in the city, a notification woke and shook off the dark. "Cut. Rain slicks Indiranagar like new enamel. Tires hum over pooled light. I'm in it, caught in the monsoon's low drum, my bicycle's chain a wet mantra. The file notification blinks green on my phone inside a zip bag, and I don't open it yet because some things need a threshold, a door, a ritual. Voiceover, later, deposition style, mic on the table, eyes on the edge of the lens because that's where honesty sits. Ananya, VO. You can't unsee a watermark. I parked under our lab's lintel and shook rain from my hair like a stray animal and hadn't yet learned what we had done. Title card, if this were film. Render noise. We hadn't named it yet. It had named us. Act 1, the 5. Morning bleaches everything ordinary, even miracles. Our conference room was matte black, table, coasters, the flush of the embedded cable trays, as if color were an indulgence. 5 lanyards hung like patient snakes from chairbacks. 5 mugs made different shapes of steam. 5 sets of eyes tried not to look too much like belief. Aravind started with the fluency of someone who has slept 3 hours and drank the difference. He called it calibration drift, but what he meant was the way truth moves when you squint. Overnight, the OPM helmet had learned to match MEG microbursts to saccades at sub-millisecond resolution. He said it clinically, with that half-apology engineers have when they admit to a miracle. This is what it looks like when the system stops guessing and starts remembering, he said, sliding a spectral plot across the table. Lines lifted and fell, a city skyline EKG. Layla, who could make a patch note sound like liturgy, had brought a book instead of a slide. A tar, edges softened by thumb oil. She read without preface and without asking permission, not in the way of imposition, but in the way of rain. Layla reads a verse from a tar as feature map annotation. What you call I is a drop drawn from a mirage. Her voice put a thin sheen over the room. We let it settle. Somewhere on the floor below, a printer chirred like a bird that had learned the wrong language. Tsering slid a sheet into the field of our collective gaze. A mandala, 12 petals. The lines were not ornamental. They were instructions, if you knew how to listen. His face did that thing it does when he's both amused and careful, the corners of his eyes held by string. We let the thin engine of the projector warm. Maya stood, not tall, but taller than any doubt she allowed in, and tapped a paused frame from the first film. She was pointing at the vendor's knife edge. The blade had caught light in a way that felt like writing. Maya Sen. This is a pattern, not an artifact. It repeats at scene cuts, and here, she taps a paused frame, on that vendor's knife edge. My hands, I said, do not believe in fate. Ananya, we're not here to chase numerology. Layla, mild. Then call it rosette 12 and treat it as a kernel primitive. Names are promises. Once we gave it one, it grew complex. A knock on the glass carried its own weather. DCP Ila Singh stepped in without waiting to be invited. She had seen the sleep clinic front we kept for regulators, journalists, and the anxious. Today she carried a thin file with a thicker implication. She didn't know about Rosette 12. She didn't need to. In a city this dense, the present always leaks. Ila, one of your beta volunteers filed a complaint, claims their dream videos match real places they've never been. Also, a missing person lead. You people recording more than dreams? The five of us exchanged not a look, but the idea of one. Maya smiled exactly as much as professionalism allows, and no more. Maya. We reconstruct internal perceptions. No external surveillance. We can cooperate, of course. I found my own voice smaller than I meant it to be. Ananya, quiet. What's the missing lead? Ila, a chalk rosette, 12 lobes, on a platform in Yeshwanthpur. It wasn't there yesterday. It is now. It was the now that hurt. The room inhaled and forgot how to exhale. Somewhere, a mug ticked as metal gave up heat. Beat. That's how a story puts its hand on your neck. I looked down at the mandala and up at the paused frame and out through glass to the corridor where the world pretends not to be watching, and I knew the day had decided to be longer than the calendar allowed. Act 2. The Rosette Walk. We went field quiet the way a flock turns, all together, without vote or visible signal. Hoodies instead of badges, caps, disposable rain shields. Nobody said incognito because in a city of 12 million that's just called walking. The platform at Yeshwanthpur held the default smell of travel. Iron, old oil, hot plastic, an undertone of something that dreams of leaving. The chalk rosette was there. Exactly there. Not approximately, not acceptably, precisely where it had bloomed in the dream film. The chalk still had grit, new enough to take a fingerprint. A child blew a whistle, and I heard the dream's pinprick note laid over it like a palimpsest. The mango vendor looked up at us as if we were a camera angle he recognized. Aravind, under breath. Either we predicted chalk, or something wrote to the world. A drop fell from the platform's tin roof and hit my wrist with an exaggerated weight. Tsering's hands made a small gesture at his chest, a mudra of acknowledgement, and then he did nothing with attention. He watched the edges of sight like a craftsman checks the microcurve on a blade. Layla set her phone's metronome to a breath pattern. 4 to 7 to 8. Inhale, hold, exhale. It smoothed the burr on the world. She half closed her eyes the way you do when you want to see the seam and not the cloth. She practices muraqabah, she had told us once, not to tame the mind, but to notice who's holding the leash. For a heartbeat, the platform stuttered. Not much. A jitter you could mistake for a shiver or a blink or bad voltage. But the world, like a liar, gives itself away at transitions. Layla, soft. The rosette is not chalk. It is a seam. We took the photos that would later be called evidence, and later than that, artifacts, and later still, fables. Maya shot like-for-like angles to match the dream. Back at the lab, we pushed them into Karthik's patient machinery. He ran phase congruency analysis across both sets, the dream film and the waking photos, and there it was, rosette 12 emerging on both, right at the edges where the diffusion decoder crossfades attention maps. He rubbed his face twice and leaned back as if distance would correct the hypothesis. Karthik, I hate being the sane one, but this looks like an edge-aware renderer, optimizing foveated transitions. I raised my eyebrows toward the ceiling, where reality had been hiding. Ananya. In dreams? Yes. In waking? Karthik's mouth did something you might call a shrug if mouths could shrug. Karthik. Unless the same engine does both. We didn't say simulation. Not because we were afraid of the word, but because words do what you tell them, and we didn't know what we were telling yet. Instead, we named our ignorance and sharpened it. While we were adding columns to our doubt spreadsheet, the net coughed. Maya drew the line first. At 311, there'd been an outbound spike to a mirror in Tallinn. The path tasted like old procurement. Nora Alvarez, ops, contracting, good at saying no, was the only one with access that looked like that. She denied involvement with a face that made the denial feel too heavy for her features. Maya set a trap with the clean efficiency of a surgeon who knows exactly where to cut. A canary rosette, invisible under normal rendering paths, but threaded through a dummy sleep file in a way only a thief would find. We let it sit where normal curiosity wouldn't go. At noon, a black badge courier arrived for routine compliance, and we smiled and offered him water and let him collect what he had come for. By evening, a bidding email pinged the inbox of a rival shell, shy of proper nouns. The attached content fingerprint matched the canary. Maya to the 5. We have a leak, and private interest that thinks our chalk drawings are IP. We didn't get to gloat. Illa called with the afternoon's other reality, her voice held between report and warning. The missing person had returned. He had woken in his own bed, head ringing like he'd slept inside a bell. He was repeating a phrase as if it would stop him from falling through the floor. When the dreamer breathes, the world inhales. He claimed he had followed a rosette into the dark between frames. A kind of quiet took the room, the one that isn't absence, but a preparation. Searing, gentle. He found a threshold. I tasted iron and didn't know if it was fear or old pennies. Ananya. Lucidity isn't enough. We need controlled entry. Layla had been waiting with something that behaved like a ritual and like a spec doc. She proposed a combined ritual technical driver protocol. She read it once, then slid it to me, and I felt the paper warm. Layla proposes a combined ritual technical driver protocol. Pre-sleep, Trataka, candle gaze, to stabilize microsaccade vector fields. Recitation, a breath-matched dika as a machine-readable marker. Induction, Yoga Nidra, script with tax phased at 40 Hz. Cueing, a soft scent pulse at dream cut boundaries. Safety, a Tibetan re-entry phrase to anchor return. Maya's eyes found mine, and in the bright of them I saw both permission and accusation. You're the one who named it, her look said. Now touch it. Maya. And we record. From inside. Ananya. We record. But this time we steer. Act 3. First drive. Night makes labs honest. All the polished front of house turns back into racks and cable ties and Sharpie labels that only the person who wrote them can read. We dragged 5 cots into a long rectangular room and bent the sensor canopy arms like mechanical flowers over each. We stripped the ritual to its bones. No incense, no silk. Aravind hummed Raga Bhairavi under his breath to calm his hands while he tuned the TFUS pulses. A cracked speaker on the west wall added a sympathetic buzz in G that we decided to read as blessing. Tsering wrote the re-entry lines in Tibetan on a whiteboard in a hand that looked older than any of us. He capped the marker and touched the characters as if they could touch back. Layla printed the dika in transliteration, thin enough to slide under a pillow. Maya checked the locks with a habit you would call paranoia if you didn't know what she had seen. I signed the protocol with the brittle flourish of someone lodging a complaint against the universe. The target was modest. Subject 07's platform dream. Enter, touch the rosette, test the seam, return. I told myself it sounded like checking a fuse box. Ananya, eyes closed. Begin. I have fallen into sleep before like a cut. This was a spill, a gentle incline. Darkness pooled. The lab dissolved the way a film dissolves, from the edges in. Breath synchronized not by command, but by physics. Someone, maybe Layla, traced the dika to a heartbeat. A scent, sandalwood, but finer, like memory distilled, rose and fell with us. Gnosis, the lab's visualization wall, lit and then learned to see. It shows what our machines see, and our machines see what we teach them to, and we are never innocent in our teaching. It showed 5 audio-visual feeds, resolving from noise into scene. The train platform. I felt the platform under me like a language I knew as a child, the grit, the conditional light. Our voices were stitched through the intercoms we'd allowed ourselves to carry into the dream, transparent, compressed, terribly human. Maya. We keep time. 3 minutes inside, then re-entry. Copy. Layla. Copy. Tsering. Copy. Aravind. Copy. My own throat made a noise and chose not to say copy because the word felt like a demand. The chalk rosette was there, bright as evidence. It wasn't chalk. It had never been chalk. It was an outline of what happens when the world can't decide which of its stories to follow. I knelt, knees remembering the lab mat and not this platform's dust. My hand hovered. The sound of the platform thinned. Even the whistle in the distance drew breath and held it. Ananya. Engineering check. If this is a seam... I pressed my palm to the rosette. The world stopped making noise. Not silence, vacuum, a flaw in the mix. In that instant, a lens flare corona unfolded, and the Rosette 12 revealed itself not as an image, but as a gate. The platform peeled away with the delicacy of skin from an old tattoo. We were standing in a white corridor whose walls carried faint glyphs. Not letters, but low-poly Buddha fields, geometry pretending to be mercy. The corridor hummed in the same frequency band as our 40 Hz induction. That felt less like coincidence and more like somebody congratulating us. Layla, breathless, a whisper of praise. Subhanallah. Tsering. Hold the anchor. Remember the return. We walked because the human default is forward. Aravind touched the wall, and the shader rippled under stress, more honest than paint, less forgiving than flesh. His OPM-MEG trace spiked. In the lab, Karthik made a noise that would later be transcribed as yelps, and his console showed the decoder's loss collapsing toward 0, alignment like a bell note finally centered. A window opened that wasn't a window, because glass implies outdoors, and this was a reveal. It didn't look back to the platform. It looked into our own lab from a slightly elevated angle, as if the ceiling had grown an eye. We saw us. 5 bodies under canopy, wires lettered with the local names of their manufacturers, the curve of Maya's hand on the lock, the way my left ankle always hangs crooked on a cot. Maya's voice came steady but thin, like wire. Maya's voice is steady but thin. We're being observed. I looked up into the angle that should not exist and felt heat climb my neck. Ananya, or we are the observation. Karthik, in lab, into mic. 2 minutes elapsed. Time does strange things at the border. Layla began the re-entry recitation, soft, sitting in the pocket between throat and air, La ilaha illallah. Tsering's Tibetan braided in, Nangwa Tongpa. The corridor cooperated, tightening like a good suture. I could feel my body from the outside, like a coat you remember fits when you see it. We stepped through the rosette back onto the platform. The platform dissolved. The lab took us like it had always been ours. And we woke, all five gasping the same gasp, the one you make when the pool is colder than your courage and you jump anyway. A CT3. Aftermath. The machines had done us the kindness of not alarming. Our heart rates were crashing in a choreography of survival. The dim circle of lab light behaved itself, and in it, the five of us looked like actors who had not yet been told where to stand. Silence took a full measure and then yielded. Maya, hoarse. We were filmed by a camera that doesn't exist. Aravind rubbed the heel of his palm into his eye, as if he could abrade the image down to belief. Aravind, or by the engine that renders us. Layla breathed once, as if to put a ribbon on panic. Layla. Sufi teachers talk about muraqabah, to watch as one is watched, not paranoia, a reciprocal gaze. Tsering nodded, like it cost him a coin. Tsering. In Milam, the point isn't to control the dream, but to recognize its nature. We recognized. I pulled a laptop into my lap because some things should be written before they cool. The file name typed itself. Wakefulness Protocol. In the first line, I put what none of us wanted to say out loud, which is always the right thing to write first. Observation. Rosette 12 functions as a boundary condition between generated frames. Corollary. Same kernel may underwrite waking perception via foveated rendering. The language felt like steel, cold, weight-bearing, not comfortable, exactly what you want. Ananya. We need to test waking seams, induce microcuts, and look for rosettes in real time. Karthik's grin is rare and belongs to his childhood. Karthik. And what if you find them? Maya answered for all of us with a realism that tasted like metal. Maya. Then we've proved nothing anyone will believe. Layla's lips formed yes without sound, and then she gave it voice. Layla, we will not persuade, we will demonstrate. Aravind brought in the portable OPM retrofitted for waking capture. We had been pretending it was a prototype. It had been waiting for this exact sentence. Tsering set a candle in a glass at the center of a matte black card. Around the glass, faint in grey, a 12-petal rosette outline waited with all the patience of a trap. He set the rule in a tone children listen to because they recognize the seriousness of play. Do not stare at the rosette. See it as your species would have seen the lion, at the edge of sight while you keep your eyes on the fire. I volunteered because sometimes the only way to win a game is to be the first to lose. The OPM's cool ring kissed my temple. The headband's pressure felt like a promise I hadn't made. The candle flame's motion became the room's metronome. We recorded my microsaccades as TAF, temporal attention fields, draped over the incoming noise like mesh. Aravind nudged peripheral LEDs to micro-flicker at 90 Hz, too fast for conscious notice, just slow enough to irritate the renderer that keeps your life smooth. On the wall, filters dialed up edge coherence from civilized to tell me the truth. The rosette bloomed. Not chalk, not doodle, not Jesus on toast. A primitive. It arrived exactly at a blink, the moment the engine had to cut and didn't have the budget to be elegant. It was Rosette 12 as plain as day, if day were coded. Karthik, softly. There it is, in waking. Maya froze the frame not out of triumph, but gratitude. Sometimes you catch a fish and apologize to it. I closed the laptop. The sound felt like an oath. Ananya. We drive again. But next time, we bring back more than footage. Layla tilted her head, an interrogative already in her eyes. Layla. What? Ananya. We bring back a message. Cut to black. It would have been tidy to end there, with the dramatic efficiency of a pilot that knows how to ring the bell and leave you wanting, but tidy is not how we found it, and tidy is not how it held us. If you are reading this as testimony, You will want the connective tissue, the parts between the famous lines, the breaths you cannot hear on the recording, the practicalities that make a miracle survivable. I will give you those because the mystery is not ruined by detail. It is fed. Interlude: How the Lab Learned to Whisper. We built the lab to be seen from the street as a sleep clinic because there is no more modern religion than biohacking your rest. The real work happens 2 doors in. Plastic plants by the front desk, a laminated brochure about apnea. Behind that, everything the city helps you hide, the howl of money and the purr of GPUs. On the day of the first film, the fans cut harmonics in the 16 to 19 kilohertz range. Aravin's little delight. He had shunted a resonance out of the perceivable band, not because it mattered to the hardware, but because it mattered to us. And the difference between an experiment and a song is whether you remember the people who have to stand there. Layla put a string of prayer beads on the rack's handle, and when anyone who wasn't us was touring, she took them off. Faith is private, she said. I asked if the lab counted as private. She looked at me like I'd asked whether hearts counted as bodies. She said nothing. She prayed. Sering's corner is the one with the mat that you never step on with shoes. He never tells you not to. You learn. People think discipline is denial. It's joy with instructions. Karthik had Noesis's startup tone pitched to a just noticeable difference above the AC hum. So when it warmed, the room bent toward attention, even if you were pretending not to care. Maya didn't run the lab so much as hold its spine. She has a way of asking you if you are sure while making you want to be. I watched her once with a soldering iron and once with a skeptical donor, and the hand positions were the same. And me? I am good at asking where the seam is. Sometimes it looks like curiosity. Sometimes it looks like cruelty. After the visit to Yeshwanthpur. On the platform, a man selling peanuts had a burn on his wrist in the precise shape of the scoop he used to move his work into cones of newspaper. The child with the whistle wore a blue shirt with a stain shaped like an animal you would draw if you were 5. These are the details I remember, because when you are trying to tell if the world is rendered, you touch its small concrete. We didn't talk on the ride back. You don't talk when your model has leaked into the street. You stack your scandal carefully. Back at the lab, the 5 of us occupied the 2 beats between crisis and plan. Then Maya asked me to call Nora, not because she thought it would help, but because she knows my voice makes people tell the truth or their preferred lie quickly. Nora answered on the second ring, voice shaped by air conditioning and a refusal to be surprised. She denied. I let her. You cannot compel cooperation from someone who has never had the pleasure of an honest failure. Maya's trap was elegant, yes, but also ethical. The canary rosette embedded in a dummy file could harm no one. Anyone who had it had confessed by their possession. You don't need an angry God if you have a good checksum. The missing persons phrase. When the dreamer breathes, the world inhales. It's the kind of sentence you hear in a fever or a poem and dismiss as tautology, unless you know what it feels like to put your palm on a seam and have the stage lift. Ila's voice over the line had the kind of compassion you expect from someone who has had to tell mothers to come to the station. She didn't believe our work was dangerous. She believed the world was. She seemed relieved to be blaming physics. She asked me if the missing man had done anything reckless. I wanted to tell her that doors are not reckless. They are invitations. I told her no. It was the truth, and still felt like I had misled her. The driver protocol on my skin. Layla's list reads like edgeless mysticism until you do it, and then it reads like a driver's manual for a beautiful, irresponsible car. Pre-sleep, trataka, candle gaze. I had thought staring at a candle would make noise. It makes a kind of kindness. Microsaccades find a rhythm. The edge detectors that live in meat learn to nod their heads to the same drum. After 7 minutes, a different part of my brain had the wheel and used it less violently. Recitation, a breath match dikka. It's not the word, it is the match. breath and phrase braided. Machine readable is not a metaphor. You can be passed by what you repeat. Induction. Yoga. Nidra with tax at 40 hertz. We ride gamma because intemperate neuropapers say consciousness lives there, and because on my head the strap feels like a promise, and because 50 years of bruised science owe us one Joycean coincidence. Cueing, scent pulse at dream cut boundaries. The sandal was not a cliché, it was precise. Memory is a smell fetishist. Safety. Tibetan re-entry. You will ask if the words matter. They do, because they are lids you can put back on. Because Sering says them like he means your breath to come home, because I believed him. And that's how my body learned the trick. Inside the corridor. You'll want me to describe the glyphs. You hope their shapes will tell you if we are in someone's language or someone's hallucination. I can tell you that polygons feel like mercy because they spare you the sin of precision. I can tell you the hum made an ache behind the eyes that was not pain, exactly, but an insistence. I can tell you that the white was not cold and not warm. It was what hospitals promise, and airports pretend, and temples occasionally deliver. A place you might be made new. You want me to tell you if I felt watched? Of course I did. But that is not evidence. The window was. The angle was wrong. Our ceiling did not have a camera. Our ceiling had a fear of cameras, because Maya. When I said, or we are the observation, I meant maybe we had walked into a part of the renderer that had its own debug view. Maybe consciousness is a log viewer with pretty fonts. Maybe we are both the event and the print statement. After we woke, the air tasted like metal because adrenaline is both a hormone and a marinade. I wanted to cry and couldn't because that would make it sentimental. I wanted to laugh and didn't because that would make it small. We talked like we had been scheduled to talk. The lines you have heard were spoken. Between them, we were animals who had seen our reflection in an unintended mirror. We didn't sleep. We didn't not sleep. We occupied the liminal animal in the city that learns to nap between traffic lights. Illa texted once, "Any updates?" And I put the phone face down because sometimes love looks like silence. The waking test. I need you to understand the candle. People think fire is dramatic and dangerous. In a lab, fire is the friend you bring to a party to remind you you are alive. The rosette on the card was faint enough to only exist if you wanted it to. The rule was old. Look at the light, not the seduction. The blink is a scandal. Your brain cuts out a chunk of visual input every time the lids go down and pastes over the gap with confidence. You do not notice. The renderer notices. It has to. We asked it to show its work, and it did. Resentfully, briefly, beautifully. When Karthik said, "There it is," he didn't mean spots before his eyes. He meant architecture. Maya freezing the frame felt like an apology to the cosmos. "We're sorry," it said, "to have asked you to reveal a trick, but we are grateful you did." When I said we would bring back a message, I wasn't being cinematic. I was placing an order. If a seam can be pressed, it can be used. If a gate opens, it doesn't do so only to let you peek. Gates are for traffic. What happened after cut to black? Because life doesn't. We made chai on the lab stove, the one we're not supposed to use because the building's insurance frowns at open flame. Layla rinsed the pan with a tenderness usually reserved for relics. Searing smiled the kind of smile that doesn't show teeth, but shows history. Aravind, who doesn't eat sugar, put sugar in his cup and claimed it was for science. Maya wrote to legal in a way that both told the truth and would let us keep doing the work. She is a poet of disclosure. She knows that to tell everything is to tell nothing. She sent the email and closed her laptop and ran her hand down its lid as if to quiet a fussy child. I went outside. The rain had decided to name itself Drizzle. A dog sat under the awning with the dignity of a monk. The street smelled like wet dust and gasoline and the bright green that plants push into the air when they are grateful. I looked at the world and tried to see the seam. It did not show itself, which is how seams flirt. I went back in and wrote this, with the understanding that some things are not meant to be written, and some are not meant to be read, and some must be both. When we drove again, well, you asked for episode 1. The message belongs to 2. Until then, keep your eyes on the candle and your attention at the edge. And remember the rule no one needed to say out loud, because the rosette had already taught it to us. When the dreamer breathes, the world inhales.